Okay, hi guys. Welcome to our last presentation of the SRP. It's Dr. Sheldon. He's going to talk about presentations and what goes into and what doesn't go into a good presentation. There are cookies up here. The ones over here are vegan and gluten-free. Those are full of carbs and sugar. After Dr. Sheldon gives his talk, I will go over what the requirements of your presentations are going to be, how long they are, things like that. So we will do that after he is done. And for now, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sheldon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. How y'all doing? Yeah. All right. Good. Good. I've been giving this presentation for who knows how many years, but more than 10. I got to say that while I may not be an expert on giving presentations, and there are going to be differences in different what's the word I'm looking for? Subject areas, fields I have studied the art of giving presentations for many years. One of the things that you should do, especially when you go to graduate school, if you go to graduate school, you're going to have to go to a lot of presentations, and you're going to find that 90% of them are awful because people don't know how to give presentations. So instead of sitting there trying to surreptitiously checking your email, you should pay attention and decide what they're doing wrong. I took this advice of my own many years ago and sat through many presentations and made many notes on what people were doing wrong and what people were doing right. Now, what I think what people are doing wrong and right, it may be different than what you think people are doing wrong or right. But most of us know that some of the best, there's a lot of people here who I have not seen present, but some of the best presenters on campus are people like Dr. Shedd or John D'Entremont, who are very good presenters. And one of the reasons why is that they're very unique and original in the way that they do their presentations, and they don't actually use PowerPoint, really. Dr. Shedd does use PowerPoint, but he just uses a lot of images. But anyway, so, if you ever have a chance to, both of them have retired now, but if you ever have a chance to hear them give a talk, you should, and see the kinds of things that they do. But anyway, so I believe that I know a fair amount about what makes a good presentation, regardless of whether you like my presentations or not. And so that's what I'm here to talk about. So first of all, as in a presentation, I believe, and a lot of people don't, but I believe very strongly in the outline, regardless of what the outline looks like, whether it's just a silly, real quick thing. But the outline of my talk today is I will talk about the purpose of an outline. I feel like I'm in an infinite loop now. But that's it. That's done. I'm done talking about the purpose of an outline. You should have one. Oh, why? Why should you have one? You should have one because a lot of people maybe don't want to be sitting through your talk, or they're a little they're a little bored or something. Having an outline gives them a sense of what's coming, and when you know what's coming, it really helps you to not. And it's not that they don't want to sit through your talk. It just helps them understand what you're talking about. It helps connect people to what you're talking about. I'll talk a little bit about the purpose, then the things that you really need to focus on at the beginning of the talk, the middle of the talk, the end of the talk. And then I will give you a couple more pointers, and at the end, if we have time, we will, at least for a moment, talk about posters, which is a different kind of presentation. And then at the very end, assuming that we have time, we will ask people in the audience to share discipline-specific stuff. Purpose. This silly image is back from the very first time I ever gave this talk. It was I gave it with Beth Schwartz, and she pulled up this image. And it's basically just to communicate your purpose. Try to communicate clearly what your purpose is. I can't tell you. Oh, and this is the point of the picture. If you didn't get it, is that somebody calls up Walmart and says, "I need a cake," and they say, "What do you want written on it?" And they say, "I want written on it, best wishes, Suzanne," and underneath that, "We will miss you." So, you know, so it's just clearly communicating what you want. I don't know that this really fits here, but the purpose, you know, so I have so often gone to a talk where I've heard people just start talking, and I have no idea what their purpose is, right? So my purpose today is to give you advice on how to give a good talk. If you just start talking, then you've lost half of your audience. And my batteries are running low. So when I push this, it doesn't always. Oh yeah, so I want to start with a little video that I always start with. It's getting pretty old now, but I think it's worthwhile. I do actually have it here somewhere. You just click on something. So one of the things I say later is always preload your videos, and I had preloaded this video, but
there's some things I hate about PowerPoint, and I figure it's kind of my duty to point them out.
I did check the sound.
Common PowerPoint mistakes. Number one, people tend to put every word they are going to say on their PowerPoint slides. Although this eliminates the need to memorize your talk, ultimately this makes your slides crowded, wordy, and boring. You will lose your audience's attention before you even reach the bottom of first slide. Please don't do that anymore, please. Number two, most common, many people do not run spell check. Big mistake. Nothing makes you look stupider than spelling errors. If it's got a red line under it, recheck the spelling. And then finally, I hate this. Avoid excessive bullet pointing, only key points. Too many bullet points, and your key messages will not stand out. In fact, the term bullet point comes from people firing guns at annoying presenters. Hence the bullet point. Bad color schemes, not good. Clashing background and font colors can lead to distraction, confusion, headache, nausea, vomiting, and loss of bladder control. I can't stay on that one too long. Here's something I've noticed. The number of PowerPoint slides you have in your talk, the less useful your talk actually is. Unfortunately, my presentation is right there. I've also noticed this. People love to pack data into their presentation. They shove more and more data thinking it's better, but it's not. The more data you have, the harder it is to read your slide, and the effectiveness plummets. Now you can improve the effectiveness by adding some shading and some 3D effects, and then some second order and third order effects, and then, I know, let's add some labels. That'll help a lot. And that's pretty much every marketing slide I've ever seen right there. Yeah. Then some like VP of marketing standing there going, it's real clear in Q4. What the hell are you talking about? Now, I'm into, in animation, people become animators in PowerPoint. You can have things flying all over the place, and that can be good. If you're a visual learner, that will improve the effectiveness of your performance. But if you're easily distracted, more animations, and people have no idea what you're talking about. They're just, wow, that is cool, wow. And there's regions here, by the way. There's the simple but effective region. There's the active but confusing, the effective but boring, the active but ineffective, the dull but static region, the busy but useless, the ADD only region, the useful but amusing, the stupid but confusing, the dull triangle, the hyper triangle, the sleepy square, the dizzying pentagon, and everything else I just call pointless motion. That slide right there took me an hour and a half to make, right there. PowerPoint can just suck the life out of you. It's amazing. I've also come up with this. It's a kind of a little science I've invented called font analysis. Basically, the font you choose says something about who you are as a person. There's a huge list of fonts, and you choose one, and that says something about you. So be careful the font you choose. For example, if you choose Courier New, it happens to be my favorite, you're probably organized and structured. If you choose Matisse, it means you're artistic. And if you choose Times New Roman, it means you're lazy, apathetic, and unimaginative, and you always use the default. Oh. A lot of Times New Roman people, welcome. We have some more. If you use freehand script, you're a horrible speller, so you try to hide it with a hard-to-read font. Very smart. If you use Gothic, it means you're very pale and you wear black. And if you choose Wingding, it means you're a nerd and you have no life. In fact, if you know what those symbols mean, you'll never have a date, trust me. Just don't bother.
All right, well, I actually think that he makes a lot of really good points, as much as he's kidding. Whoops, sorry. There we go. I'm actually a believer in, I'm fine with using PowerPoint, it's just using PowerPoint reasonably. Is really what I'm getting at. Shay, I can't remember. Were you at that Amazement Square event where we got a Science Festival award about 2 years ago? No, I thought you might have been. Okay. Yeah, somebody did PowerPoint there that just reminded me of what he did. Like it was, yeah, you weren't there. Okay. It was terrible. I mean, people really do.
I remember them talking about it though.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, people really do make those. Sort of ridiculous, like fill their slides with information so that you don't even know what they're talking about. But anyway, but PowerPoint is certainly a standard for giving presentations, but you at this point, I think you don't need to use PowerPoint. You can use pretty much anything. You can use a website, Google Docs, you can create a PDF. Prezi was in for a little while. Most of us don't like Prezi too much. There's one of my favorite TED Talks is using dance instead of PowerPoint, which I would suggest all of you watch at some point. On using nothing, and that's a good example of John Donchemont doesn't use any necessarily any thing to help get his presentations. But I do believe, especially for a scientist, that things like PowerPoint is usually, and not all of you are scientists, I understand that, but PowerPoint is pretty useful and pretty standard. So let's see the beginning of the talk. The beginning of the talk, I just wanted to see if I had any notes on that in this. I didn't memorize my notes necessarily. Hopefully I remember most of the things. But the beginning of the talk is really important. I already talked about, like, there's a whole bunch of things that are at the beginning of the talk. The purpose, the outline, the title page. Actually, before you even get there, you've got the title page. The title page, a lot of students don't realize how important the title page is and things that should go on the title page. Your name first, and your immediate collaborators. It's not people who just contributed, but the people who you would consider a co-author. And your advisor, whether they're a co-author or not, goes on the title page. More often than not, I see students leaving out their advisor. The advisor, that is the advisor on the project. But what I will always tell students is put your names, your authors on one line, and then the advisor below that, right? We don't need equal billing. Your affiliation. If you ever give a talk on something that you did at Randolph College, you should always acknowledge Randolph College. That's another easy oversight. Your funding agency. If somebody funded you, the Randolph College Summer Research Program, the Randolph College RISE program, the National Science Foundation, you must put that on the title slide. Actually, it is a requirement for most granting agencies that you put their funding, acknowledge their funding on your title slide. And if you don't, you get into trouble. National Science Foundation has a whole book about these kinds of rules. It is different from the acknowledgements that go at the end. The acknowledgements are people like Louisa and Dr. Currier and Aaron. Often we acknowledge them for their contributions in helping you get your summer research done, but they are not necessarily co-authors on your projects. They go at the end. Sorry, guys. They go at the end. Okay, so for example, Dr. Soika and I did a project with Zach Vernon and Russ Burt a couple of years back. So this is what the title page sort of looks like. You've got the title, the names of the students, then the names of the faculty, the institution, and the funding agency. Okay, I already talked about the purpose. That's super important, so I put it there again, is to make sure everybody knows the purpose of your talk. Hopefully you do know the purpose of my talk at this point. The hook. The hook is something that many people don't use at all, but the hook, or the advanced organizer, is something at the beginning to catch people's attention, whether it's a cartoon, whether it's a joke, whether it's a comedy video. It's something to engage people, to get them to be engaged with your presentation. I would always suggest that and the hook can simply be just a cartoon panel on a page, something to engage the audience. That is a really good thing to have close to the beginning. Then the rest. So now comes the meat of your talk. Let's see what comes with the rest. Title each page. If you are using something like PowerPoint, title each page to make sure that you are, again, communicating to your audience where you are in the talk, especially because they might remember your outline and they're like, oh, okay, we're in the third of 5 bullet points in the outline if you title each page. Rule of thumb, depending on the length of the talk, about 1 slide per minute is quite reasonable. If I give a 10-minute talk, I might have 15 slides, but if I give a 45-minute talk, I might have 30 slides. And that doesn't count the kinds of, sometimes you have 3 slides, which are really just one, but to the audience, it's like one, if you know what I mean when you do PowerPoint. But basically 1 slide per minute, fewer when your talks are longer, more when your talks are shorter. I once went to a presentation, somebody was applying for a job when I was in graduate school, they were applying for a job in the department. Now back then, mostly we didn't use things like PowerPoint, we used transparencies. And this person comes to give this talk, and she's got one of those 3-ring binders that's literally 3 inches thick with slides. And she's pulling out this, and I mean, there had to have been hundreds of slides in there that she's pulling them out and putting them on, and they're filled with equations, and that is not the way to give a talk, and she certainly didn't get the job. Maybe not because of the talk alone, but equations. So this is something my advisor in graduate school really instilled in me. I went to graduate school for physics. Physics uses a lot of equations. He said, when you give a talk, never put more than 1 equation in your talk. And this is somebody who, he's never going to get the Nobel Prize, but he's on the list. You know, this is somebody who knows what he's talking about as far as I'm concerned. He's like, don't put equations on the slides. People just aren't going to read them. They're not going to ingest them. They're not going to figure them out. They're not going to understand them. There's no reason to put equations on the slides. He's like, not 1 per slide, 1 per talk, right? So you don't put a lot of equations. Now, that's going to be a little bit different for you mathematicians, sorry, yeah. That might be a little bit different for you mathematicians. But if I would love to see you give a talk without any equations. Yeah, math, I have definitely come to the conclusion that math is a little bit different than everything else in terms of the way talks go. It's taken me many, many years to come to that. Okay. Keep text to a minimum. Notice that I'm not reading the text on the page. I'm just using the bullet points to make me think about what I want to say to you. Keep text to a minimum. Use bullet points. And like the comedian said, don't use a lot of bullet points, but just use the bullet points sparingly to give the audience an outline of what you're talking about. And when I say keep text to a minimum, I never use paragraphs or even full sentences on a slide unless it's quote. Unless it's a quote. There's never any reason to read text from a slide. You are the expert. That's important. I should have said that to begin with. That's the first thing you should understand going into giving a talk, that you are the expert, and you should come across as being an expert. And one of the ways you do that is to know what you're talking about, is to not practice too much. We'll talk about a little bit more about this later, but to practice just enough that you can sound like you know what you're talking about, without reading text from slides. Oh yeah. So this is another thing. Now, so sometimes, especially as somebody who is inexperienced with giving talks, you might be afraid that you're going to forget things. I'll tell you from experience and from talking to other people that if you're a nervous speaker, which I always have been, which is why I can't stop moving, which I know is annoying, but I've taken that as it's something that I do, and I don't feel strongly enough to stop myself from doing it. But coming back to the text, is that sometimes you think, I'm going to forget. Well, if you practice the talk 3 times, and you practice the talk close to when you give it, you're not going to forget. You might think you're going to forget. You're not going to forget. But for most people, that is true. I am not somebody who supports using note cards or notes for a talk, unless you absolutely have to. And if you have to, that is fine. So I had, for example, a summer research student one year who we were giving a talk, she was giving a talk, sorry, on her topic, which was a physics, she was doing an experimental physics project. And there was something that I thought was essential for her to say, and every time we got to that point in the talk, she would forget to say it. Every time she would forget to say it, and I said, write it down on a note card and have it on the desk, right? Make sure you, so there are times when that's fine, but if you can avoid it, I wouldn't put things on note cards. Images, I think you will notice if you think back, I have 1 image per page, is that you limit the number of images, but pure text on a PowerPoint slide is pretty boring, so you try to have images, but not useless images. They should be images that are relevant to what you're talking about. I'm not entirely sure that the dog is relevant to what I'm talking about. But I don't know if you saw the duck on the first page. That was an outline of the duck, right? It was on the outline page. Anyway, so limit your images, but don't eliminate them. Animation. There's a sound that comes with that, but the sound must not be working. That's why you don't use sounds. And you limit yourself to using sounds and animations. First of all, you limit yourself to using useless sounds because they're useless, and half the time they're not going to work. I literally did have a sound associated with that, and it didn't work, even though you could hear the YouTube video. And animations can be you only use them when necessary, right? It wasn't necessary to spin those words in, you use them in a limited fashion, I would say. I wouldn't say you don't use them at all, but you use them in a limited fashion. Oh, that was another animation. I don't know what it did because there's a sound associated with it. I don't know if maybe the people on Zoom can hear the sounds. I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter. Okay. I will have more to say, advice about the middle of the talk, but that's pretty much the logistics of the middle of the talk. The end of the talk, again, I think super important to really think about how you end the talk. First of all, the number of times I've been to a talk where people just didn't say, this is my conclusion, or didn't have an obvious conclusion is crazy. Like, wait a second, what was the purpose of me sitting here? Like, what did you do? You got to tell them what you did, because not everybody is going to get everything that you said. Everybody zones out at some point. I'm sure everybody in this room has zoned out at some point already. So you've got to have a conclusion. You've got to make it clear that it's your conclusion. You should have a slide titled either conclusion or the end or something like that. And you should explicitly give a conclusion that addresses your purpose. This is not the end of my talk. This is the end of your talk. Come on. And then after the conclusion, you have the acknowledgements and references page. Again, something that I think is very important is that you do not read that acknowledgements and references page. A lot of people, especially students, tend to read that acknowledgements and references page. You just put it up, you say, here's my acknowledgements and references, and you're done. Now, if you have time and you really, really, really want to thank your advisor or Aaron, Louisa, and Dr. Currier, you can do that. But I would say don't read your acknowledgements and references page. That is pretty much the norm, to not read it and just leave it up. Can't tell you how many times I've been to student conferences and students will spend half of their talk time reading their acknowledgements. I want to thank this person. I want to thank this, like they're at the Academy Awards. So yeah, you no need to read that stuff. But you should have it. Asking for questions, the very end. Conclusion, here's my acknowledgements and references. Anybody have any questions? No, don't do that. God, that's my biggest pet peeve about giving talks. Don't ask for questions. Why? Because you have to give people time to appreciate your talk. You finish, here's my conclusion, here's my references, thank you. Everybody claps, and then the host usually asks for questions. And if the host doesn't ask for questions, then you can ask for questions. But let everybody clap and appreciate the talk before you ask questions. The reason why I say this is a pet peeve and this is important is because the number of times I've been to talks is where it gets incredibly awkward, like half the audience is clapping and people are asking questions. I mean, like nobody knows for a moment what's going on. And it's better just to not ask for questions right away. Let everybody applaud, you're done, take a pause. Okay, now does anybody have any questions? I would suggest that you really, 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 really try to not ask the questions the moment you're done talking. Okay, a couple more logistics I want to talk about. I won't be going on for much longer, I promise. 10 minutes. So don't memorize your talk like it's a play, right? You should be able to talk like you're an expert. If you memorize it like it's a play, you're going to sound like you're reciting it like it's like you're a bad actor in a play. Is that you should really be an expert, right? Every time I give this talk, I say something different. I talked about the same things, but I didn't memorize what I was going to say. Don't memorize. And that's where I would, my sort of hard rule of thumb is I write the talk, I might spend anywhere between 1 and 12 hours to write the talk. More often it's on the longer side. And then I will practice it twice, and then day of I'll practice it once. That works really well. No more than that, otherwise it sounds memorized. Pauses. So I used to be a much more nervous speaker. I used to be a much faster speaker. I still am pretty fast. And I used to just zoom through the whole thing. And I got some really good advice when I was a young faculty member from a mentor who basically said, if you can't, like if you're just nervous speaking and going on, you've got to put in some physical pauses. It makes such a difference to the audience. It makes a difference in terms of the way you come across the audience. It makes it more impactful to have some real planned pauses. Pauses between sections, pauses at important points. Now, how do you do that if you're a nervous speaker? What I mean by nervous speaker is sometimes when you give a talk, it's hard for you to think about logistics as you go because you're nervous, right? And the trick that I learned, and that I still do to this day, and I have for my entire life, is to put blank slides in your talk. And that's one of the beauties of using some kind of slides. Whether you're using physical slides, I would put a blank transparency, or whether you're using PowerPoint, it's a white screen with nothing on it. When I come to a white screen with nothing on it, which I haven't done in this talk, honestly, when I come to a white screen, I'm like, oh wait, there's no text there. In my head, I'm like, oh, pause. Take a breath. Okay, now for the next section, you push the button. Nobody in the audience will notice. Nobody in the audience will notice that there's a blank screen because that just seems like it's a natural part of PowerPoint. Especially when you're doing transparencies, nobody notices you have blank transparency because you just flip it over. So putting in physical pauses, so ahead of time, you write a 45-minute talk, the 12-minute talk, you write a 12-minute talk, and you say, okay, here I'm gonna switch gears, I'm gonna change to a new topic, or here's a point that I really wanna impress upon them, put a blank slide before it when you get to it. Just skip a beat, take a breath, and here is what I want to impress upon you. Right? Pauses are really important. Project your voice. Oh boy, that's the one of, oh my gosh, I don't understand why people, and I said, so why they can't project their voice. You've got to project your voice. I'm projecting my voice right now. For me, it becomes natural, right? I'm kind of almost shouting. Project your voice. You've got to practice projecting your voice. It takes a lot of energy. But you've got to practice it, you've got to be aware of it. Multiple presenters, how do you deal with multiple presenters? Think about that. I don't have much to say, we can talk about it afterwards if people have advice, except for the fact that I think the better way of dealing with multiple presenters is taking a section each rather than you do this slide, you do this slide, you do this slide, you do this slide. That's a little bit frenetic, right? Although it works sometimes, I think it's better if you can say, you do the first 5 minutes, I'll do the next 5 minutes, take sections. Interactive elements, oh yeah. Super important, if at all possible, to, what I mean by this is interact with your audience. If only doing what I'm doing right now, which comes very natural to me, which is not standing behind the podium. Right? I am talking to you, I am trying to interact with you, and I am, when I look at you, some of you nod, right? That's something that's just an automatic reaction. Interact with the audience, ask questions of the audience. Super good thing to learn, to do, to ask questions of the audience. I will even use clickers, right? You know what I mean. These days, you can do it on your phone, do some kind of polling of the audience, especially if you're doing a 45-minute talk or an hour-long talk. Is to make sure that you break it up by interacting with the audience. One of the things for me is to not stand behind a podium. Hence using a clicker so that I can talk to the audience, I can make eye contact with the audience, and interact with the audience. Dress. I think you should always dress better than you think you should. and then you won't make a mistake because there's nothing wrong with dressing nicely. I put on this tie the moment before I walked out the door because I was like, I'm not going to wear a tie. I'm like, wait a second, I'm not even taking my own advice. Put on a tie, I'm giving a talk. Why not? Put on a tie. Always dress a little nice. It's respectful to do so. Time limits. Dr. Sorkin knows this might be one of my biggest pet peeves, is staying within the time limits. Staying within the time limits. Yeah, don't go over. Now that's really hard if you're not practiced at giving talks, because what happens is I created 15 slides and I'm like, oh, they're all so important, but it's taking me longer to get through it than I thought. I'm getting, and I have 30 seconds left, but I have 5 slides left. What do I do? Oh, no, it's so important. Everybody wants to hear everything I have to say because it's so important to you too. That's bullshit, right? No, everybody wants to get out. They want to hear what you have to say, but they also want to go home and take care of their kids. They want to get a drink of water. They want to get something to eat. They want a cookie. So pay attention to time limits and adhere to them strictly. Never go over your time limits. Get used to cutting out slides if you're taking too long, even if you think they're important. If you get stuck, if you're giving a talk and you get stuck, in particular, it might be, I forget what I was going to say here, or for, in my experience, a science and math presentation, and you're doing some, more intricate physics or math, and you get stuck at, like, you don't understand, I can't remember what I was going to do, or I don't know what the result is, or I can't even think of a reason why you get stuck, but you can imagine you might get stuck. You know what? So first of all, never apologize to the audience. Never apologize to the audience. Your first instinct is to say, oh, I'm sorry, I screwed that up. Let me try again. That's your first instinct. Don't do it. If you do it, it's okay. But there's no need to apologize to the audience. What it does is it tells the audience that you screwed up. Instead, even if you're mid-sentence and you're like, I have no idea what I was going to say next, just move on to the next slide and start talking about a new topic. Don't say, I'm sorry. Don't say, wait, let me try that again. Just move on. You know what? I can guarantee you, I swear to God, 90% of the audience won't even notice that you got stuck. They won't. Like, oh, I'm not sure what he was saying, but okay, we're on to talk. Yeah. If you get stuck, just move on. No need to say, I'm sorry, no need to try again. It's also a good word of advice for if you do demos, which I do a lot of demos, and I have this tendency to try to redo the demo because I think the demo is so cool, but it's really better if you're doing demos just to, it doesn't work, just move on. Nobody will remember. Instead of you just trying again and then screwing up and looking like an idiot and catching the room on fire, which I did right at that end of the desk with the president of the college in the room. I caught the room on fire. I did. Okay.
So if you're nervous about your presentation, you won't do that.
Yes. I was like trying to get this demo to work. And then we had to get out the fire extinguisher, and it was a chemical fire extinguisher, and it filled the room with a cloud. And I'm like, do we just end? And President Klein said, no, keep going. Okay. All right. We're going to stand. Yeah, I already talked about that. You can stand behind the lectern if you want, but I would advise you not to. Preload videos and websites. I already said that. It helps because sometimes it just, in PowerPoint's terrible at loading videos and websites. So what I did is I preloaded all my videos ahead of time, so that if it didn't load within PowerPoint, I could just minimize PowerPoint and play it. Okay. I'm gonna, since I said 10 minutes, let me go to make sure you know your audience, know who you're talking to. One of the big problems we used to have with summer research talks, which isn't such a big, doesn't seem to have been such a big problem in recent years, is basically people wanting to sound smart. And I got to say, more often than not, it was advisors wanting their students to sound smart. I'm not sure why that's so important to an advisor. I mean, really, I'm not like, and therefore the student using words and terms and things that the summer research audience just didn't understand. They were terrible. We had a series of chemistry ones at one point. Dr. Seidman. Dr. Seidman wanted his students to sound smart, so that nobody would understand them, so they sound smart. I mean, seriously. I just remember Casey Meeker crying when she was working with Dr. Seidman, because I was giving her advice to be understandable. You guys know Casey, don't you? Some of you have had her for business. No? Maybe? No? Okay. She now teaches here. She teaches here in the summer. She was a student here. There were some biology ones, the molecular biology ones that nobody ever understood. Math is a whole other thing. I'm just not entirely sure anybody's ever going to understand all of that. And that's not a criticism. That's not a criticism. It's just a me coming to terms with the fact that what I want to be true may not be true.
Yeah, it's wild. Our advisors told us much stuff about, like, that's just completely different about math presentations.
Yeah. What was the presentation, that poster that we got stuck at?
Oh, it was a physics one, I don't even remember what it was.
A lot of equations, right?
All I remember is he just stood there and it was a poster, and Dr. Joe and I were judging pictures together at this conference. And he talked, I think, for 20 solid minutes without breathing for us to and I don't think we had any idea what he was talking about.
No.
He kept going and going and talking faster, and we're both just like,
Yeah.
what are you doing?
Yeah. It was awful. Pay attention to your audience is the point. Pay attention to your audience. And especially for a poster, which we'll talk about. I said 10 minutes, and that's me, so almost going over my time limit. But let me just say something about posters. Especially for a poster, you should keep your spiel short. That's the purpose. Poster, keep it short, let people ask questions. All right, so let me move on from these things and talk real quick about posters. Apologies, but I'm going to take 5 more minutes to talk about posters because what I have to say is so important that you all really want to hear. Posters are a different beast. A poster is literally something you put on the wall. There's an example over there. There's an example over there, thank you. And you stand in front of it and you answer questions, but you should have a little spiel about it. First thing is read the instructions for the conference. I can't tell you the number of times I have screwed up by going to a conference and having a poster that doesn't fit on the poster board. Read the instructions. When Sweetbriar had the Marcus conference, they once had those poster boards, but they had them oriented in portrait mode. And nobody, because nobody's that's an unusual, usually your poster is landscape. So read the instructions for size and whether they're gonna have pins for you to pin up your poster. Typically, your poster session lasts for an hour, so instead of giving a 10-minute talk, you're standing in front of your poster for an hour answering questions or giving a spiel. The poster, while traditionally has not been seen as important as the oral presentation, that has really changed over time. I think the poster is a better presentation mode because you have more opportunity for discussion as opposed to being limited to 2 minutes for questions. It is a visual presentation of your work, an advertisement of your work. Your task in creating a poster, if you choose to give your presentation as a poster, is to create a poster that tells a story. That is not perfect. Now that I look at that, not a perfect example because it doesn't follow a very orderly, but it's still a good example. That was one of my students who did this one. I let him choose a different format. But anyway, create a poster that tells a story. Prepare a no more than 3 to 5 minute summary. And when people come up to your poster, ask them if they'd like for your summary. Sometimes they would just assume ask you questions and not hear your summary. A poster basically has this kind of format where you set it up so you see this poster is not like that. That poster probably is. Where you read it in columns. The most important thing I can say, I'll just fast forward through all of this, is your fonts should always be bigger than you think they should be. And never put a font on a poster that's smaller than 24 point. Biggest mistake I've ever seen. I went to one student conference where all the judges, 100% of the students were downgraded because 100% of them put too much text on the poster and wrote too small. 100% of them. gotta just like, you just can't put everything on a poster that you want to put. White space pictures, really big fonts. Like I said, nothing smaller than 24 point. And poster 2.0. This is covered up at the top. This is called poster 2.0. Well, I had an argument, I think it was last year, no, the year before, I can't remember, about somebody said, ooh, poster 2.0 is the best thing since sliced bread. And I think it is not. Poster 2.0 is, don't fill your poster with text. Instead, put a little bit of information and put your main part. This is poster 2.0. I'll just tell you, I put it up there because I don't believe in poster 2.0. The idea behind a poster is don't put too much text on it. You don't have to do this, right? Where you're just putting a little bit of text on the side and one sentence in the middle. You don't have to do that. Just don't put too much text on it. That's all. And last thing I'll say about posters is that if you need help, if you are going to create a poster and you've never done it before, just ask me. It's easier just to ask me. How to do it. What I would normally do is because a poster is that big, right? And how do you set it up? And I would normally do it in PowerPoint. But I'd rather me telling you today. If you want some advice on how to create posters, just ask. Email me, ask me in person, whatever. What you will see for professional posters is one single large sheet. They cost about $100 to print. We found a fabric place that'll actually print them for $50 on fabric, and they're much cooler. But you don't have to do that. You can just do this. You just print it on a regular color printer in the Center for Student Research and do that and not pay anyone to print it. In conclusion, right, just think about your presentation, think about what you're doing, think about your audience. You are the expert. Make sure that you sound like one, and you know, I won't, since I'm running out of time, I won't say anything else. I'll just say if you're interested, just Google the TED Talk dance instead of PowerPoint. It's fantastic, and it's somebody who actually used dancers instead of PowerPoint, giving a talk on lasers. Oops, those were my references. Okay, that's all I got.
Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, okay, I was gonna say, I didn't know if you wanted to talk about the
In
expectations
a few
before.
minutes, but I wonder
Okay,
if anybody had any questions.
questions, yes, sir.
Do you recommend like using like a definition slide? That's a fun enough.
I would say it's discipline specific,
Yeah, maybe it's discipline specific. I would not typically do that, no.
but it's a good question, like in Kim Steele's presentation, she's gonna have several definition slides.
Yeah.
What we're studying, like the difference between rape and sexual assault.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it depends on what you're talking.
Yeah, I mean, define things as you go, absolutely. But if you can talk without having to define anything, that's like getting rid of jargon perhaps, right? If you could talk without defining anything. But as opposed to having a single slide where you define everything, I would just define things as you go if you need to define them. Other questions or comments?
There may be things in the chat.
Oh, in the chat.
I don't know if they're new or old.
Any other questions or comments? Where is the chat?
If you stop share, it's easier to see too.
Okay. Yeah, do you have a recommendation on how we should format our names and majors on the first line? First of all, I wouldn't typically put your major on the title slide, although you absolutely can. I mean, but I wouldn't typically put your major on the first slide necessarily. Yeah, no more advice other than simple, what I already said about putting your names, the author's names separate from everything else to make sure that it's clear who you are and you're the people who have authored this paper. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that probably. Other questions, comments? Okay.
Cool. All good? Nope. Thank you, Dr. Sheldon.
Sure.
So in terms of requirements for the presentations, Louisa brought a couple of poster examples. We have the poster board. The thing about the poster board, we are letting you choose if you want to do an oral presentation or a poster or both. Depending on your discipline, you may want to do both, because conferences that you all may go to may be wanting a presentation, or they may be wanting a poster, and if you have both prepared, then you're done, you're ready, you have an idea of what you're doing. So if you want to do both, that is fine. I would suggest that you talk to your advisor about what they think should also go in your presentation, because as Dr. Sheldon and I made clear, what is going to be required in a physics presentation is going to be very different than what is going to be required in a sociology presentation. Perfectly fine. But you do need to consult with your mentor. One of the things to keep in mind, every project, I'm going to repeat this, every project gets 12 minutes. It's not every person. If there are 2 people working in a project, you 2 need to figure out how to split that 12 minutes. There are several faculty who are working with different students on 2 projects. So each of those projects gets 12 minutes, and then max 12 minutes, and then about 3 minutes for questions.
I got a word of advice.
Yes.
What we typically will do, and again, we didn't talk about this before, so you can make your own rules, is we'll say 1 oral presentation per project, but as many posters as you want. So if you want, if you got 2 people who in one project who want to do 2 different presentations, then the second person will do a poster.
Yep. So we just want to make sure that because we have so many projects this summer, that we're not here for 8 hours, right? So I will, we're going to practice next week. We're going to have a practice presentation. That does not mean your presentations have to be ready for next Wednesday. It's just, you can run through some stuff if you want. You can ask questions if you want. You can show it to your peers and to me and Louisa and Aaron and say, how does this look? Do you think it's going to flow okay? So do not feel like you have to have things done on Wednesday. Dr. Sheldon, Dr. Soika, Dr. Fab, we've all been doing this for so many years. People don't like giving presentations. It's still the #1 fear of Americans next to death. And some people are even more afraid of giving a presentation than they are dying. So this is why we want you to get some practice, not worry about it. Remember that everybody in this room, everybody on Zoom wants you to succeed. We are here to support you. We are here to encourage you. You've all done fabulous work this summer, and this is a safe space to practice giving a presentation. If you stumble a little bit when you're talking, as Dr. Sheldon said, just take a breath and keep going. We'll be here going, you can do it, you can do it, okay? We need your PowerPoints. Aaron and Louisa and I were laughing about this yesterday. I would like your PowerPoints by about somewhere around 5 or 7 on Thursday evening. Aaron and Louisa told me I'm being unrealistic. I've been teaching for 25 years. I will set high expectations and hope you all hit that bar. The reason being, we need to load your presentations onto the Google Drive. We are going to put them in a certain order. We're gonna get to Nichols beforehand and I wanna load everything so that everything is just ready to go, so that we go from your presentation to your presentation. So the earlier we have your presentations, the better. How did I put it yesterday? If you do not send us your presentation before presentation time, you are shit out of luck. That happened last time and it screwed everything up. Do not send us your presentation as everybody's walking in the door. That's just, it's unprofessional. You wouldn't be allowed to do that at a conference. So my dream is that you send it to me the night before. The sort of expectation is you'll probably end up trickle it in at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., but you have got to have it to us, to me and Louisa, at least an hour before the presentations are done. Otherwise, it's gonna just not roll very well. What else did we, with the poster boards, we reuse these. So you are not to draw on these, you're going to use sticky things to put them on here. So if you have, say, if you're gonna show an equation and another equation and another equation and say, this equation leads to this, have little pieces of paper with the corresponding arrows as well. So print out your equation, print out a little arrow, print out another equation, because we keep these for SRP so that we don't have, because they're very nice, they're really thick, we've got the easels for them, we want to be able to reuse them over and over. We can take, I will have my good camera with me so we can take high quality pictures of your posters, so that you can have that for your records and things like that. We are not going to be live streaming this. We met yesterday with IT. We are going to be Zooming it, and we're going to be using the same Zoom address that we've used all of the whole SRP. So feel free to send it to people if you want your parents or your friends or the person down the street to come and watch. They can join the Zoom because we want all of you to have a good recording of your presentations. Did I forget anything, Aaron or Louisa, before I take questions?
I just wanted to reiterate that the Center for Student Research, if you're doing a poster or you're printing stuff, that's also, it doesn't have to be a poster. I'm not always there, but I can always arrange for you to, if you want to go at 2 o'clock in the morning and use the printer or something like that. I just need to let the info security people know that you have authorization to be in there, and that can be arranged. You just have to let me know.
Yes.
And then you can also, if you have alternative ways of printing your poster, like you're doing a standard poster, that you can just mount that poster onto the poster board instead of doing slides or individuals.
Yeah, you are not required to use these poster boards. We just want to give you access to them if you want to print out different pieces and not have to go to Staples or Office Max if it's even in business and print out a huge thing. Okay. So, any questions, concerns, comments? Just to reiterate something I put in one of my emails is we are not opening up our luncheon to everybody. You cannot invite guests. We are limited to the people who are doing SRP, the faculty and the students who are doing it. Dr. Sheldon is invited, obviously, as head of CSR, but you can't invite your best friend and your significant other. And we just, because of COVID and because of money, it's just us. Okay, we're planning on doing it in Nichols. I will be running through it on either Wednesday or Friday or Thursday next week to make sure that things will run smoothly. And then we're going to have the posters and the lunch in the student center area, which will be really nice to actually be in that area again and be able to use it. Any questions from faculty? Any other comments from faculty since?
What's wrong with that poster?
What's wrong with that poster?
What's wrong with that poster? The text is way too small. All the colors are probably not necessary.
So
The text is way too small.
this is great.
I have a picture of it.
From across the room, you see exactly what it is. And to be clear, this project was great and the information is great, but it would take you half an hour standing in front of the poster to read it. And that, say you brought this to a conference where, those of you who have not been to an undergraduate conference before, sometimes you'll have 150 or 200 posters in one room, and people will spend maybe 5 minutes in front of a poster. Many people would just, even though it's an interesting research, cool results, people wouldn't stop to ask you questions because they feel like they had to read through everything. And so you may not get feedback on your project as well, because one of the goals of posters is not just to get your information out to other people, but to have, people may ask you questions that you never thought about before, right? And so again, it was great research, but so much that unless it was the only poster in the room, most people would not stop to read it. If you want feedback on the posters, Dr. Sheldon has done tons, Dr. Slicka has done tons, Dr. Fab has done tons. I don't know how much Dr. Licata has, I've had some. So there are a lot of us who can help you with the poster stuff if you want to do a poster. One of the fun things about posters for some of your projects could be really cool pictures.
Yeah, and then Faith had a question.
Okay. Say, do you have a question?
Yes, I was going to ask if outside participants can join via Zoom.
Outside participants, because not everybody's going to be here in person.
Join by Zoom.
Yeah, they can join by Zoom. Yeah, absolutely, because I know that Kim is going to be driving in from where she lives, but not everybody's going to be here in person. That's why we're going to continue to do Zoom.
But we can invite guests.
Oh, absolutely, guests are totally allowed on Zoom. Yeah, because then you might get some really interesting questions from somebody who's not involved in SRP and somebody from outside who hasn't heard your stuff yet, and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know about the tree project, like, or what is heat mapping, or like, how are you really defining reproductive justice, or any of these cool things. And so yes, invite people you want to be on Zoom. Yes, William.
You said it was just like the normal link that we use for SRP
Yeah.
stuff though?
Yeah, it's going to be the same link as always. And part of what's good about using my personal link is I have the Prime membership, so we can have up to 200 people. I can't imagine we're going to get 200 people, so don't freak out. But if your parents want to come, if your friends want to come, they can. Questions, comments? All right. I will see the students. What?
The Ethel Center?
Oh, yes, in the Ethel Center, there are some little trinkets that we had bought earlier, and I kept forgetting to bring them. There are those little eggs of silly putty that I bought everybody silly putty. So there are packages of silly putty. There are small containers of hand sanitizer if you want some of that. There are still snacks in there. We would love to get rid of all that stuff before the end of SRP. So head into the Ethel Center, grab some of that. If you did not get your power bank or your bag, let us know and we'll get that to you. Otherwise, let us know if you have questions. There are cookies up here. There's water and sparkling water left in the cooler from the picnic on Saturday. Okay, so have at it, and I will see the students next week. Bye, everybody online.